staff is going to be James White, and I'll let him tell you more about that as well. But I want to give James a hand tonight before we get started. Very proud of him tonight. So the next item on the flyer is the praise team, and I am not the praise team, so I'm not going to sing a song or anything. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do a shorter version of this graduation, no less heartfelt or no less special tonight, because I got a quick story to tell, of course. But a couple years ago, about 5 years ago, I had to go. I was in trouble. I was drinking, and I went to a program down in South Florida in the Everglades on Lake Okeechobee. It's called Dunklin Memorial Camp. There's about 100 men there, 70 staff and their families. The place is world-renowned. They do international training. They've been around 60 years. Supposedly one of the top places in the country for faith-based rehabs for alcoholics and drug addicts. And I went there. From the outside looking in, at 10.5 months, I looked like a superstar there. I became what we would call a senior student, over 100 guys for my last 10 weeks there. You had 5 10-week blocks, not just one 10-week block. And graduated. I did not surrender everything there. And I went out, and I took my will back, and I fell, and I got sick, and I got sicker, and sicker. And so what? I came to change lives. But here's what I said to my family when they said, you need more help, you need to go somewhere else. I said, you know what? What could anywhere tell me that Dunklin didn't do for me? What could these people up in South Carolina tell me that this world-renowned place couldn't do for me or teach me? What's different up there? Nobody could answer me. So that we start making guys call in and do intake calls. And I called and talked to a guy on the phone. And I know I have good discernment on the street. Godly discernment is what I strive to get. But discernment nonetheless, over that first phone call, I talked to this James White guy. And I could tell and discern in his voice that there was something different about that guy. 300 miles away, I could tell. Over the next couple of weeks, I talked to him and continued to talk to him. And I said to myself, I want something that guy's got. He's different. He has love in his heart. He cares. He's been through what I've been through. So the Lord made a way for me to get up here and meet James. And then I got to go through the program and work with him, and then work with him after I graduated the program. And then I'm going to let him finish the rest of that story. But I just want to show you that's the power of what God can do. See, we can't always see what God is doing in our lives at the time, right? God was working in that situation. God had a plan for me to come up here and to surrender my will and be able to go back and help others. And I'm so grateful. I love this guy very much. He holds a close place in my heart. And James, would you come up and share your testimony with us, please?
Well, first I want to say Happy New Year's Eve. I couldn't picture a better way to come into the new year. I mean, you made me emotional. Alright. I was born in 1980 in my hometown of Tampa, Florida. My mother and father got divorced when I was 3. I went with my mom and my brother went with my dad. My father soon after won custody of me because my mom's boyfriend was abusing me. As I got older, my situation got worse. My father was also abusive physically, verbally, and emotionally. By the time I was 10, I had been physically abused and molested by 3 different friends of the family, and I always saw drugs lying around the house. When I was 11, I went to live with a boxing trainer and his family in Orlando, Florida. They were a good Christian family, and they treated me as if I were their own. And I knew at that time that's when God started preparing a heart that which would one day draw me close to Him. For the next 27 years, I carried pain, shame, and embarrassment on my shoulders because of the things that happened to me as a child. These things fueled my drug addiction. I struggled with pretty much every drug you can think of. When I was 26 years old, I was introduced to heroin. The same year, I met my kid's mom, which we have 2 boys named Caden and Cash. Throughout the next 10 years of my life, I was a full-blown heroin addict. I let my selfish ways choose heroin over everything in my life, even my family. On December 2016 was the last time I used heroin, but I justified that by using other drugs even more by saying at least it's not heroin. My lies, my manipulation, and stealing left me homeless behind an abandoned seafood restaurant in Goose Creek. Little did I know God was already preparing a path for me. On February 26th of 2017 was a night that I'll never forget. I started crying and feeling convicted for the way I was living, so I cried out to God for help and asked Him to save me. 2 days later, I was at Change Lives Ministry. While I was at Change Lives, God started something in me only He could finish. He was restoring everything in my life, and He gave me a new family, people who loved me and poured into me constantly. Then I graduated and became a staff member. Shortly after, I got into a relationship, and I clearly wasn't ready for one. I immediately started putting my relationship before God and all of my other selfish desires. The Lord tried to speak to me through Scripture, my Christian brothers and sisters, because I wasn't divorced yet, but I didn't listen. I started getting angry because God wasn't answering my prayers or helping my relationship. So the person that I was with withdrew herself from the relationship out of her obedience to God. But then by then I had already made poor choices and selfish and hurtful decisions. The next thing I did was what I've done my whole life. I ran from my problems, and I didn't care who I hurt in the process. I also justified my actions because I wasn't using drugs. But Satan was putting things in my path that would soon get me there. I left the ministry where God had placed me because I didn't want to be a man and face the mess that I was making. I didn't pray about it because I knew where I was supposed to be. I was already in another relationship, still married, still living in sin, and still wondering why God wasn't talking to me. But now that I look back, He was talking to me the whole time. It just wasn't what I wanted to hear. I was still going to church and doing my devotions every morning just to say that I did it. I was becoming a whitewashed tomb, clean on the outside but dying on the inside. Living for my own will and not God's led me to relapse in my head long before I ever touched a drug. Soon after, I went on a week drug binge. The people around me knew I was doing something because I wasn't the same person. So they told the person that I was dating, and she confronted me, so I came clean and I had to face the consequences. I went to a place in Columbia, South Carolina called His House. And once again, my motives were not about getting right with God. I wanted to run further away from my problem. The funny thing is, it's hard to run from a problem when you are the problem. After 4 months of continuous drug use, running from what I knew was right, I finally gave up. I left Columbia and moved into a camper in Saluda, South Carolina, and all I had around me was chickens and cows. So I spent 2 weeks getting sober and raking pecans for an elderly woman that lived on the property. I started praying for God's guidance and help, asking Him to please tell me what to do. Then He put James and Tommy on my mind, so I called Faith Home in Greenwood, South Carolina instead. I did my application and was put on the waiting list, and God let me know right away that's not what He told me to do. So I called James and Tommy, and of course God's will for me was to come back here. I was scared, nervous, ashamed, and embarrassed to come back, but with the Lord's strength and help, I was able to humble myself and step back into His will by being obedient to His call in my life. Within 2 hours of being back at the ministry, Jimmy, Tommy, and Pastor Odell hugged my neck and told me, "Welcome home." All of those uncomfortable feelings disappeared instantly. That's the faithful God I serve. And with the love of Jesus through my Christian brothers, I received confirmation that I was back right standing with God. I want to thank everybody who prayed for me whenever I disappeared. I want to apologize to the people that I hurt. And I want to thank everybody for welcoming me back and loving on me, because they know that's what Jesus would want them to do. So I thank everybody, and Happy New Year.